All right, it's time. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. The July 9th meeting of the CDA will please come to order. Would you take roll call, please?
Wayne Clark,
Yes.
Jerry Mutter,
Yes.
Jason Metz.
Here.
Karen Gale,
Here.
Don Namer.
Here. We have quorum. Thank you. Can I have a motion to receive the minutes of the previous meeting?
So moved.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Minutes stand approved. Thank you. First item on the agenda. I think, in here. I, Gerald Monitor, Chair of the Community Development Committee, the notice of the hearing will now be read. Public hearing to consider the sale of public land for the property located at 1706 South 68th Street. Tax key number 453-07-6-003 to UHS of Delaware Incorporated, Milwaukee Behavior Health LLC in the 68th Mitchell redevelopment area. The Executive Director of the Community Development Authority has filed with the authority the notice of the hearing. The affidavits of publication will be filed as soon as received from the official newspaper as required by section 66.1333 of Wisconsin statutes. This document will be made part of the records of this proceedings. The purpose of this hearing to afford a full opportunity to all interested parties to express their views on the proposed consideration of the sale of land for the property located at 1706 South 68th Street, tax key number 453-0776-003 to UHS of Delaware Incorporated, Milwaukee Behavior Health LLC in the 68th Street and Mitchell redevelopment area. Following the closing of the hearing of the authority will consider to vote on a resolution authorizing the sale of land for the property located at 1706 South 68th Street, tax key number 453-07-6003 to UHS of Delaware Incorporated, Milwaukee Behavior LLC in the 68th Street Mitchell redevelopment area. If adopted, the resolution will be submitted to the Common Council of the City of West Dallas for approval, provided at section 66.33 of the Wisconsin statutes. Mr. Stiebel, you now have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Over 6 years ago, the Community Development Authority adopted a tax increment financing district for this area to renovate and demolish the dilapidated properties, particularly the old Milwaukee ductile plant, which had been vacant for several years after being vacated, and became a classic industrial dinosaur, and was acquired by a private entity who demolished the building and salvaged the equipment, the materials out of the building, and then sold the site to the Community Development Authority. The Community Development Authority bought that site and several other sites, and now is in the process of disposing of that site. We've marketed it for several years, trying to get a high-quality development. Most recent part of this was a distribution facility, and even they wanted a subsidy in order to be located there. So we think we got a very high-quality development that's coming into this facility. Universal Health Services is going to be constructing a behavioral health hospital here, which will be a high-quality office-looking facility, which will be a great asset in the neighborhood. Of about 250 employees, it will be a 120-bed facility. And they will be paying fair market value for the land, and no tax increment financing will be provided as an incentive to this entity. They have about a $10.7 billion corporation, so it's got a lot of history behind it, a lot of economic power and history behind the facility. UHS went door to door in the beginning of June to explain their proposal to the neighborhood and to solicit input and advice and consultation. They conducted a neighborhood meeting on June 13th, which was well attended, and a large number of people showed up, and were able to go through in detail with representatives of UHS to talk about the advantages and the disadvantages of the project. As introduced to the CD at their last meeting, the Plan Commission reviewed this project for site landscaping and architectural, and for special use provisions, such as a required discharge policy that they cannot discharge to the street, unlike other behavioral health hospitals. I think Rogers Memorial might do that. But they're required them to take the patient from the facility to another facility of their final destination and not being discharged to the street. The public hearing tonight is on the sale of the land for this purpose, and then the Common Council ultimately will have the final say on all those special uses, like landscaping, architectural, and the sale of the land on July 16th, whether they approve it or disapprove it, or whatever they want to dispose of. The facilities I mentioned is a high-quality facility. UHS has made significant architectural changes to the facility. I think they've been very cooperative in trying to integrate the facility into a residential, i.e. industrial neighborhood. And I think it's going to be a great asset to the property values of the city. Speaking of property values, we talked with our assessor about what the impact would be to adjoining properties. And he said it would have no discernible effect. And I also talked to him about Wauwatosa, because they have Dewey Behavioral Health Hospital. And he said the values of Dewey, the assessor at Wauwatosa said the values have risen, which is a really good indicator. We also talked to some people around the country that have UHS facilities. And one of them that we talked to was a former appraiser, and said the property values were increased. So we're delighted to see the impact of a nice-looking building, what that has to a neighborhood. They're going to pay good family wages of $55,000 and about $11,000 a year in benefits, so the average wages are going to be quite good. We put up on our website a number of things about this facility to help educate the public as much as possible of what to expect from this facility. I think a nice thing that UHS has proposed that once the building, if it's approved, once the building is constructed, they'd have an open house so everybody can walk in before patients are admitted, so they can walk around and see what the facility looks like, and I think that'll take a lot of the mystery out of it. The economic impact is relatively huge, which is always kind of nice, and that's why we want to have economic development. And I think the 11+ million annual payroll is a really nice thing to be able to have, along with all those people that are coming here and for employment and their spending power, but also the people that come here to visit their relatives and their friends that are at this facility to have a larger economic impact. The next step is to, after this public hearing, if it should be, whatever the recommendation is, will be sent to the Common Council for consideration on July 16th. If there's any additional questions, I'd be glad to answer them. But Mr. Chairman, I'd like to open it up to the public, and then we could ask representatives of UHS if they have additional comments.
Any questions of the board? If not, I will open it up to. The purpose of this is to hear affordable opportunity and interest to express their views and proposals, consideration of sale of the land for the property located near. Any interested parties in attendance may now express their views for the proposed consideration of the sale of the property of the land located at 1706 South 68th Street, tax key number 4530776-330 to UHS Delaware Incorporated, Milwaukee Behavioral Health LLC in the 68th Street redevelopment area. Please raise your hand to be recognized. Upon being recognized, state your name, your address, and your interest in the proposal. Then you may proceed with your statement. If you are here on behalf of an interested party, please state the name of the party you represent. Does anyone wish to be represented to speak at this time? Go ahead, ma'am.
Hi there. My name is Pam Lusty. I live at 1724 South 69th Street. My backyard is, you can probably see it somewhere in some of these photos. There is a half-acre parking lot, and I am directly behind that. So I see the parking lot, and I see the proposed site. So I'm at 1724 South 69th. I am a long-term resident of West Allis, as well as having lived on a property in that alley for the last 13 years. So I'm aware of what has happened throughout all of the transitional changes between companies, having the property torn down, and then by the city. So my purpose here is to express my concerns for this proposed UHS site. From the very first minute that this proposal has been made public, there has been obviously some substantial debate and strong feelings because this is a huge deal. I feel that this is not a topic of whether or not there is a mental health care need or behavioral health care need, yet it is a specific point of whether this is the appropriate use of the plot and this company is the appropriate purchaser. They have been fairly upfront with some of the things. Not everything has been honest. I have found that if I speak to somebody, that person then goes directly next door and shares those ideas and twists it in a certain way with the neighbors. And that would be some representatives that were hired by UHS. But they have been very nice and very forthcoming as much as they could. I was at the community open house that was held in the basement of the church on South 68th, and I had 17 questions. They were able to answer some of these questions, but a lot of them were not able to be answered. Several of the people representing UHS all had different things that they said to the exact same question. So there's not cohesiveness among what they're saying. Again, they're kind of saying what each person wants to hear to make it look good. Simple questions. For example, every individual I spoke with at that meeting told me the plot of land they needed to be between 8 and 10 acres. This land is not between 8 and 10 acres. So saying that, how are they, what are they pulling out of, their best interests or, their things that they think are great? I asked several times, beginning with Mary Claire, about metrics on their patient success rate, crime statistics in the community before and after they were there. Just not saying that there's not crime now because there's crime everywhere, but just things like that. During that open house, I specifically asked several times regarding addiction to drugs and alcohol, and I was told different things by different people. I spoke with them, let's see, and I apologize, I have a whole bunch of notes. I was told specifically there by 2 people that there would be no outpatient services and no walk-ins. Reviewing several of the meetings that you guys have had in this very room, the story seems to change that now we are accepting walk-ins and now we do have outpatient care. So that's, I guess, some honesty would be appreciated. Honesty about the release procedures. Initially, it was said that it would only be via an ambulance or a company vehicle. Now it's not that at all. I wonder, this is a residential area. Why are we putting this here? There are other viable sites, not only in the city of West Allis, but in the surrounding communities that are also still zoned for manufacturing and can pull a special use permit. So why is it being put in a residential neighborhood? The vice president of UHS, regional vice president, was asked if he could guarantee our safety. He said that he could not. He is not here tonight, so my notes are, I guess, hearsay or whatever, but he said that he could not guarantee it. I don't feel that this is cohesive with the other positive West Allis redevelopment that we're taking. Again, more with the changes. Originally, we were told 1 Sally Port. I just watched a video that was taken of a meeting here. Now there's 2 Sally Ports. So things keep being changed. So what is the actual site being used for? The site that's too small for what they say they need initially. I understand for security purposes that there will be no security guards and stuff like that. Living across the street, that causes concern for me. Yes, I understand that there will be a key swipe and a pin code system. I work in maintenance. I do mechanical and electrical work, and I know that those things fail. So what is the backup plan for when the power goes out and the generators stop working or something else happens? I want to know that my son and the neighborhood children will be safe. How do I know that there's not a sex offender that they're taking in who's gonna get out and see something, I don't know. I apologize. It's just obviously there's a lot of passion with this topic and there's a lot of discrepancies with everything. Originally this is not going to be emergency, but it may, and yes, it can be added to the special use permit, but things can change and people have a way of going around things. Either way, this is maybe not I mean, it's manufacturing zone, maybe this is not the best purpose. You don't always want to, you know, jump at every fish. You don't always wanna take that one home. Maybe there's gonna be a bigger fish that swims up and you wanna take that one home and fry it. This may not be the best fish for our community. You know, I still am waiting, like I said, these metrics for crime statistics in the area, success of their treatment. I wonder about the investigations by the Department of Justice. I understand that it has been 6 years. And shareholder lawsuits, stuff like that. And I appreciate your time, and I apologize if I'm all over the board. It's kind of how my head works sometimes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
My name is Ashley Altmeyer. I live at 1644 South 69th Street. And my prerogative originally was concerning how the increase of traffic to the neighborhood would affect us, and that we had people with mental health care problems in a 1-block proximity to the largest playground in the city. Originally, I was more focused on why it's being placed here in an inappropriate location when we do have other larger vacant lots available. For example, Sam's Club on Highway 100, the vacant pick and save on 111th and Greenfield. We have many large parcels of land that would be more adequately suited, that are closer to highways and freeways and not in a residential community. However, since the meeting at St. Augustine, I have done a lot of research on UHS. And I have probably about 40 news articles here regarding people being sexually assaulted in their facilities, people escaping their facilities. When I spoke to the regional director, or the regional vice president at that meeting on 68th Street, he said that patients almost never escape and that there has never been an incident where somebody has been a danger to the surrounding community. I have found dozens upon dozens of incidences of people escaping their facilities. I have found incidences where people escaped and then broke into surrounding houses, 2 of them, same individual. I found incidences where people escaped and stole cars. I have here an article of how they falsely imprisoned a 6-year-old child and would not let him go home. I have former employees testifying against them, saying that there are patient issues, that they are abusing people, that there is fraud, and that they are told to keep people in their hospital regardless of what their condition is, what treatment is needed, that they are to fill those beds and keep them there until the insurance stops paying. The day that the insurance stops paying, they kick them out even if they have not received adequate care. There are wrongful death suits against this company because they release these people without having received adequate care, and then within 30 days, there have been dozens of people that have died because they did not receive the treatment because they have committed suicide. And there have been countless cases of people who have been put into inpatient care who at any other facility would not have been given inpatient care. This article outlines a 13-year-old girl being raped in their facility and adolescents being abused. Another UHS facility, another patient death. And they go on and on and on. There's an article here about a woman being groomed for sex work by an employee there, emptying her bank account and giving it to her doctor, abandoning her 6 kids and her husband. If you do a Google search of UHS and their investigations and elopements, there are hundreds and hundreds of articles of how this company is being investigated by the FBI, how they no longer are in partnership with Medicare, how Medicare has ended their contract with them because any patient that walked through the door, including that 6-year-old little boy that was on Medicare, was automatically committed. That 6-year-old little boy was put into solitary confinement. There are 24 of their facilities have recently been closed down. 17 of those 24 facilities were facing legal action. They are being shut down left, right, and every place else. And now they want to move into Wisconsin where they don't have facilities because people here don't know their reputation. We don't have experience with them. The places that do have experience with them are trying as hard as they can to get them out of there. There are entire websites dedicated to trying to inform the public about what is going on with this facility. I live kitty corner to this lot. I have a baby. I'm scared for my baby. There are 14 facilities under investigation. There are, I had emailed the alderman earlier today with a long list of facilities that are under FBI investigation, patients being held prisoner for as long as their insurance will pay for them to be treated. Another investigation cites that they're responsible for patient deaths in their facility and patients who have perished immediately after being released. They're under investigation for insurance fraud, and it's not a couple of bad eggs. They are corporately being investigated for this stuff. It started with a couple individual hospitals, and then they found out that this was widespread, and then they found out it was so widespread that it was coming from corporate. UHS, the company, is telling their hospitals to take people prisoner for the insurance money. They've already set aside massive amounts to pay out the victims of the investigation because they anticipate being found guilty. They have $22 million set aside to pay the victims. They have been found sexually assaulting patients, including juveniles, and grooming people for sex work. We had discussed that there would be a document saying what practices they're allowed to have, what patients they're allowed to treat, that they wouldn't have violent people, they wouldn't have pedophiles, that sort of thing. I have found 3 different articles of other facilities that had those same guidelines in place, and they blatantly violated them. They treated adults in juvenile facilities. They disregarded just about every regulation ever put on them by any agency. They've been found guilty of gross negligence in existing facilities. They were found guilty of gross negligence in an incident where 6 people escaped at once. I mean, it goes on and on and on. I literally have dozens of news articles about these instances, all UHS facilities. This one is their escape patient that broke into 2 houses in the surrounding neighborhood. This is a dangerous thing to do. You are putting my family's safety at risk if you let this be built. That's it.
Thank you for your opinion, ma'am. Are there any other questions? Anyone else wish to make a statement? Sir?
Hi, I'm Jeff Matheson, 1138 South 75th Street. Has any of the local psychiatric hospitals been consulted upon this, such as Aurora or County or Rogers? We've had family members in all 3 facilities and varying degrees of care, but those facilities have been well established. I think they are certainly out to try to help the people as best as they can. And since they're the quote-unquote experts, I would hope that if not already reached out to, they would be consulted as to, you know, what's the bottom line of what a psychiatric hospital should be, minimum requirements, since the lady had mentioned all these concerns. It sounds that no matter where this organization might be, it would be a concern, whether it is in a residential or over, you know, in a non-residential area. So I think, as my wife had mentioned to me earlier, it's maybe not just that there's a facility, because we do need mental health facilities in the area, but the agency that's running them. And, you know, I would, you know, ask that maybe more thought and time be looked at making any decisions till you could get maybe some experts involvement if you have not already reached out to them. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Are there any other questions? Statements? Mr. Steele, you want anybody else?
Yeah. I'd like to call upon a representative of the UHS, and they can make whatever comments that they would like of.
Thanks, John. Diane Henneman, I'm a divisional vice president for UHS. And I don't quite know how to respond to all of that, except to say that I disagree with most, if not all, of what's been said, and the truthfulness of it and the accuracy of it, and I'm happy to talk to anybody in detail about that, but we track elopements and things like that at all of our facilities and have shared that data with people. We have not had 24 facilities closed. I don't know the context of that at all. It's a little hard to respond to that because it's kind of so overwhelmingly misstated or not true. I'm sure, so I mean, I would be happy to answer specific questions. If someone wants me to go question by question, I can attempt to respond to that, but I really don't know a lot of the things that are being referenced. I can tell you that we have millions of dollars of uncompensated care every single year in our hospitals, and it's a hard number. It's a number that exists because either people come to us and they require treatment and they don't have insurance and we treat them anyways, or like you referenced, to some extent, people's insurance runs out and they're not ready to leave, so we don't discharge them. I mean, every single hospital we operate, which is about 250, has millions of dollars of uncompensated care. So the allegation of keeping people until their insurance runs out is not true. And, you know, that's an easy number to look up, I guess, is probably the easiest way to say that. I don't know what solitary confinement is because we don't have that in our hospitals. Do you have other specifics?
While we're looking that up, if I could, the Milwaukee County Health Department did an extensive, exhaustive investigation of this company, of UHS, during the vetting process, when they were looking at all the other local behavioral health hospitals, who was the best one to be able to provide the service. And eventually, it came down to Universal Health was selected by the Behavioral Health Hospital, the Milwaukee County Behavioral Health, after they did an extensive investigation with toured the various sites and did an exhaustive investigation of all the allegations that are out on the internet. They reviewed all those as well and found them that UHS was a company that they wanted to contract with.
And really, there was a consortium of local hospitals, Rogers being one of them, that were also bidding on this contract with Milwaukee County, and they chose not to move forward in the bid process. So, you know, I think that they toured our hospitals. I mean, the due diligence that went on for over 2 years was really extensive. The Department of Justice investigation, what we've said about that, and we're limited in what we can say about that, is that they've been doing that for 6 years and have found absolutely nothing. There's no $22 million being put aside to pay victims of anything. That's completely not accurate.
I also wanted to comment on the Milwaukee County and Wauwatosa has two parts of it, their behavioral health. One was the behavioral health hospital, and one was the crisis intervention service. So the crisis intervention service is where all the ambulance goes and all the police cars go. And so the people that are gonna come to this hospital, if they may come from a hospital, but it's not gonna be lights flashing and that sort of thing. And so the traffic volume is gonna be appreciably less than it was historically. In fact, that roadway, 68th Street, was built for industrial purposes at the time. In fact, the concrete is 9 inches thick. It's probably one of the most heaviest streets we've ever built because the traffic volume was so high. And the police department, or the fire department says that during a police call or a fire call, they would not go down 68th Street because the traffic was so intense that they had to go around it to get to where they were going. So the traffic, people tend to forget that after all these years what used to be there and then what is there now.
And then maybe if I could just clarify a couple other things. The comment about walk-ins is out of context. There's an EMTALA rule related to walk-ins. You can't prevent someone from walking into your, is it our common practice? No, but you can't prevent someone from walking into your hospital, and if they need services, you're required, there's a law that says you're required to treat them. So that is how walk-ins exist in our hospitals. It's not in any way the majority of the admissions that we do, but you can't not help someone if they come into your lobby and are seeking mental health services. You have to put them in a secure area, you have to assess them, you have to provide treatment or provide referrals, you have to ensure they get to wherever they're going if you're not serving them in your community. So I think that is a little bit out of context. I mean, that, you know, again, we don't plan to have walk-ins, but you can't lock your doors to the community if they need assistance. Yeah, and I guess the discharge, I feel like the discharge discussion has been consistent in that we don't discharge people to the streets. If they have a parent or a spouse coming to pick them up, we verify that and ensure that they are here to pick them up and that we review discharge plans with them, just like you would do in a medical hospital. I feel like that's been a consistent discussion throughout our time here because that's what we do. We do provide transportation ourselves if we need to. If people don't have transportation, we verify that every day before people leave the hospital. Yeah, I think there was a general statement Brian is reminding me about just disregarding all regulations, which is pretty broad and difficult to respond to, but I can just say that we are accredited by the Joint Commission, we're regulated by every state we're in and by CMS. We really are a very heavily regulated industry. You know, we have routine audits, we have surprise audits, we have all sorts of surveys that you couldn't operate the number of hospitals we have if you were disregarding regulations in some broad sense that is just part of like a plan or something, or a way of operating.
Ma'am, excuse me, I guess that other lady has her hand up again.
You stated that you guys had not closed 24 facilities, but I have a list of the 24 facilities that were closed or sold. There are many different investigations done by many different agencies, all that found that paperwork was altered to say that people were more mentally ill than what they actually were, and that some of these, it said that there was absolutely no way physically possible for the patient to have seen the physicians as many times as you guys had billed regarding the insurance fraud. As far as the young man that was in solitary confinement, even his medical records state that he was put in seclusion.
That's different than solitary confinement.
It's a padded room on his own. It's solitary.
It's not a padded room.
And there are dozens of employees that have come out against your company stating that you guys have altered records and that these are, everything that you guys are denying, you have tons of employees even that say that they were fired for testifying against you guys or whistleblowing against you guys, that these are your practices, and that you will twist somebody's wording to make them need inpatient care when they don't, and illegally compensating doctors in order to get them to refer patients to your hospitals. And I mean, the list of lawsuits against the company is basically endless.
You have the floor yet, ma'am. Or, go ahead.
Mr. Chair, if that's all right, I'll introduce myself again. I'm Brian Randall, attorney with Davis & Kielfeld here on behalf of UHS. And conferring with Diane and working on this, one of the things that we've tried to do is be very consistent. And so I appreciate some of the questions and some of the comments you've heard tonight that have questioned whether we have been consistent. But things like 2 Sally ports have always been on our site plan, and we've been working with staff about how to screen them appropriately. And so maybe the focus in some conversations was on one of the Sally ports or the others, the size of the hospital or the size of the site. At all times, really, since we've made our application on May 31st, we have maintained consistency with the plan and answered all the questions as best we could. With respect to what's on the internet is a very powerful tool, and it's valuable to do research, it's valuable to put your perspective and your information out there. I believe, and I'm not going to ask John to go back to the slide, but on our slide, as far as who UHS is, we've explained to the city that we have 87,000 employees and 2.6 million patient visits in 2018 alone. with those numbers and with care in 37 states, there are going to be claims and allegations and disgruntled employees out of those 87,000. And I have no doubt that what the individuals are finding on the internet, they hit print and it exists, it's on the internet. But the fact that Diane just explained and Sheila Adams last month about the open investigations for 6 years, yet no claims, no charges have been brought, this company very much looks forward to when the investigations are over. And then those internet stories will have to change because we're not under investigation. So we can't prove a negative here. We can't prove that the investigation has found nothing and that there's nothing there. But after 6 years and it being an open investigation, there has been nothing that anyone else has proved against us. So the best we can do is explain how the care will occur here in West Allis, explain how the building is going to be designed and operated, and the security will work. Back to one of those good questions. Yeah, we have a lot of electronic security and double door entries, but we will have generators on site and we have trained staff. So if the highly unlikely the power should fail and the generator should fail, the trained staff will use their experience and secure patients, make sure people are safe, and then call in for assistance or other measures as needed. So those types of operational experiences that this company has will be in place.
Can I just add to that?
Absolutely,
Because we've
please.
had hospitals that were hit by the hurricanes like in Puerto Rico and other states and Texas, and I mean, there's been terrible weather everywhere, and we've never had the doors and the generators all fail at the same time. I mean, we've never, if we are ever even concerned about that, we move our patients to a different hospital, like one of our sister facilities, or, a Rogers or Aurora in the community, someone who isn't affected by inclement weather or catastrophic weather or things like that. I mean, we've lived through hurricanes in our hospitals, like more than once. It's been very significant, events for us, and that hasn't happened.
So to try and summarize on that yes, we have a lot of experience in a large company with, we believe, a very positive reputation. But yet there will be complaints, and we understand that. We know about the internet articles. We know about the various claims that are out there, some of which are from groups that don't believe in healthcare and they don't want their children treated, but yet the law may kick in and require certain services to be rendered, and then that's how a complaint might happen. An employee may no longer be with the company out of those 87,000. They may be very disgruntled, and they may put certain things that they believe to be true out there. So we're aware of that, and we've tried to answer those questions. Your staff has done a very good job of asking us the questions first, as Mr. Stevel pointed out. Milwaukee County, in the relationship we have with the county and a certain element of the referrals that are going to come through the county, they have investigated. That's what staff was just explaining, as well as those other investigations that really have not had any conclusions. So the reality is, with the market studies we've done, and we know the other operators, Rogers is expanding here in the city right now, there is a need for service in this area. And UHS found this site and found a way to design the building that will work on a 7.5 acre site, is prepared to offer that market price and to invest in the city with a $33 million hospital. And the final check that the city will have, of course, is in the special use permit. And I know that's not on the agenda tonight, and that's not what the CDA looks at, but the Plan Commission has already reviewed that, and the council will have that final review. This special use permit process is a very powerful tool. That will set the ground rules of how the operations will go, and the city will always have that to review and compare what is going on here in West Allis, even if there might be some notion in another state that something changed. So with that being kind of the overview, and to make sure that the CDA is able to stay focused on what this opportunity is, it's a significant investment in the city with a lot of jobs of good quality, and a patient care service that will add to the wonderful healthcare options that are already available in West Allis, and really do what's consistent with the master plan and the redevelopment efforts in the corridor. I don't know if we've missed any of the other, and certainly if the commission, or excuse me, the authority has specific questions or ones that you've heard in the public hearing that you want us to respond to, as Diane said, we can go into detail about that, but we wanted to keep it certainly as the highest level and the reference where the background reviews have already occurred.
Mr. Stevel.
You have inpatient and outpatient services.
We have inpatient services and we have intensive outpatient and partial hospitalization services. So not traditional outpatient services. I think that's a little bit where the confusion came in, where someone just comes once a week for medication or to see a therapist. We have, like I said, intensive outpatient, which is usually 3 times a week, 3 hours a day, or partial hospitalization services, which is usually Monday through Friday, 5 or 6 hours a day.
And you also, do you still receive Medicare payments? That's all I have.
Thank you. Yes,
I'd
ma'am.
just make a comment. So my name's Tiffany Stark. I live at 6414 West Barnum Street. I am a resident for 40 years. I grew up in West Allis. I'm a product of this neighborhood. I walked past this property as a child from where I grew up to my friend's house that lives right across the street. So this is like in my backyard. And I have kind of a unique perspective because I'm a resident and I grew up here, but I'm also a mental health professional. I work on an inpatient psych unit. And I think one of the issues, no matter where any facility is gonna be, we have an issue with the stigma of mental health. With having a facility or not, we have mentally ill people that are in our communities that need help, that are walking around or may not be. But I think we need to understand that this facility is not the county. We're not gonna have any emergency holds, like where someone's picked up and there is a hold, or there's a chapter 51 where they're picked up because they're not following their commitment. That is still gonna be dealt with Milwaukee County. This is gonna be more like a Rogers and the Aurora site kind of setting, from what I've heard. And I would like to also throw out a statistic. Most people that are mentally ill are not perpetrators of crimes, but they are actually victims. And I think we need to understand, and it's an uncomfortable subject, it's the elephant in the room, but this is what our society is dealing with. And before I am at the job I'm at now, I used to work contracted through the county, delivering meds to people in their homes, going to delivering meds to crack houses, in an environment I had no control over. It's there, people need help, and it's just screwed. And I can also say I did a little private practice. Insurance is not gonna pay a long time. They don't want to pay a long time. And actually being on an inpatient psych unit is a short stay because it shows the least restricted environment is the best place to be. It's there to stabilize the person, provide them the resources, and get them on to the next step of their treatment. That's what it is. It's not to be there forever, because you're not helping them. The things they need to do, they can't do on an inpatient ward. I see that every day where I work. They need to get things in line with housing or finances, their relationships. That stuff is not gonna be done on an inpatient unit. And I know that it's uncomfortable, I know there's fears, but any place it is, there's gonna be concerns. Like you were saying, I mean, I could look up Rogers, I could look up anything, and you're gonna find negativity. You're gonna find negativity at any institution. I'm not saying that people's fears or concerns shouldn't be heard, but we really need help, and our community needs help, and we need to figure out how. Because if you wanna talk about scary things, Milwaukee County is scary. I know, I saw things firsthand, it's not on the internet. And so we need to do a better job of providing services, not just the county providing it, because they can't. We need to have better relationships with other facilities to provide services. And so, with that being said, that's kind of all I have to say, but I understand the concerns. It's scary. It really is, but it's the stigma with the mental health thing that we're still struggling with today.
Okay. Thank you, ma'am, for your opinion. Are there any other questions?
Um,
Yes, ma'am.
Are you guys being sued by your shareholders currently? There was no answer to that.
I truthfully have no idea because I'm not in the legal department.
Okay. That says to me, I guess, a lot. If the people who are invested in your company are suing you, that maybe is a little bit of an issue. Can I also ask, you said that there was a lot of training. What type of training do they go through, since there is no security guards? There's nothing, at the check-in point, or, nobody, Are there cameras outside of the facility? What type of training do the actual staff, I know you guys have talked about de-escalation and stuff like that, and verbal, you know, just bringing everything down. How are people trained? How is this nurse or this person, you know, this janitor trained to keep me safe or to keep the other employees and other patients safe?
They're, that's a good question. They are, there's new employee orientation, which is typically a classroom, week-long training. It consists of all the policies and procedures of the hospital, all of what we consider to be best practice trainings like therapeutic boundaries, verbal de-escalation, you know, I mean, and all of the, how to run a group, a didactic group for patients, relapse prevention, all sorts of things like that. Then there's classes, certification classes, so BLS, all of our clinical staff are trained in BLS if they don't already have it. They're trained in CPI, Crisis Prevention Institute training. It's done annually when they're hired, it's renewed annually. Every time we roll out a new best practice, we train all of our staff on that. So typically, and then staff shadow on units before they work on them. They work with the preceptor, they're trained, again, a nurse knows how to be a nurse, but it's a nurse in our hospital, so they're oriented to the unit, they're oriented to how we do things, the admission process, the discharge process, you know, communication with physician process, whatever our documentation process, all of those things. So typically our new employees, clinical staff will go through 4 weeks of training and orientation before they're counted in the ratio as a staff. Non-clinical staff don't go through quite as much because there's not as much for them to learn, but they typically will go through about 2 weeks, 2 to 3 weeks of orientation and training. We extend people's trainings if when we test them, we find that they don't show proficiency or the level of confidence in their abilities, or we, you know, either they express that or we express that. You're required to do all of those trainings, you know, initially and annually. We do more than is required at all of our facilities. You had asked a question about outcomes too, and I feel like I gave you the outcome data because it's published. We have an entire outcomes company that measures patient satisfaction, whether people feel better when they came to the hospital than when they leave, if they would recommend the hospital to others. Those are all, you know, 92%, 87%, they're all very high, but I can give you that information
Yeah,
again.
that would be great, that'd be great. And then, okay, but we don't know if we're being sued by our shareholders.
I feel, go ahead, yes. I feel like that's a legal question that I'm not particularly qualified to answer.
Mr. Chair, I'd be happy to respond to that
Go ahead,
based on what
sir.
I know, being the lawyer in the room. It's not something that the legal department briefed me on, but I mentioned the internet's a powerful tool, so I did a quick search. And the first hit I found is a shareholders derivative lawsuit that came out from after one of the articles was published online about allegedly withholding patients or keeping patients in confinement when they didn't want to be. The thing to realize on a shareholder derivative lawsuit is it takes one share for someone to become a shareholder, and it appears, based on the article that I'm finding on Becker's Hospital Review, which is an industry source, it looks like, that someone who may be part of this group that's disgruntled or wants to put that message out bought a share and therefore qualified themselves as a shareholder for a shareholder derivative lawsuit. So that's where, yes, I guess we would have to admit our shareholders are suing us. UHS, according to this article, filed a motion to dismiss in November of 2018. Briefing, this is what lawyers do, is they brief it back and forth, they make the legal arguments. And this article stated UHS had until April 29th to file a reply brief. So I know that we're sitting here in the middle of July. That was an April 12th article, but that was the first hit that I found. So yes, we are being sued by at least some of our shareholders. And the context is related to some of the articles that have been mentioned on the internet, and UHS has denied those allegations, whether it's to the public in the investigations or in a shareholder lawsuit.
Thank you. Are there any other questions, sir? Yes, ma'am.
In regards to where the lot is actually located in proximity to the playground, I've got a concern for the amount of traffic that this is going to bring to that area. Now, we already have too much traffic coming down that street to begin with, as was earlier discussed, that the fire trucks would avoid that street and such. And there was recently a fatal accident on that corner. That's why the fence is down on the corner. A car went through it, a lady died. The increase of traffic to the neighborhood, how are we going to deal with that when we've already got too much traffic coming down a one-lane residential street to begin with, and now we're talking about adding 300 employees, plus patient vehicles, plus police vehicles from all the different jurisdictions, bringing people in for treatment, and ambulances or whatever, taking them back out to their next placement. How are we going to deal with the traffic situation? We've already got too much traffic on that street, and we were talking about adding literally hundreds of more vehicles a day.
There was, according to our city engineers, that there was more traffic historically than there will be in the future. Now, there's very little, because there's no, it's a vacant site. But before they had several hundred employees, plus huge trucks and semis and all that traffic that was going on there, so,
And a traffic study was reviewed.
yeah.
And then my other thing was that they have been cited by the state and governments in Virginia, Louisiana, and Texas regarding understaffed facilities resulting in patient escapes. So they are stating that the security is basically going to be that there's staffing there to make sure that people don't get out. But they've been cited with willful negligence and gross negligence because of people escaping from understaffing. So how do we ensure that they've got enough employees to house their patients? Because this has been an issue for their company in the past.
You wanna go ahead, Mick?
I don't personally know what you're referring to. I oversee 16 hospitals. I'm in a division of 80 hospitals. My hospitals are always overstaffed. My hospitals are never staffed to the grids because people always feel like they need more staff, so we accommodate our employees and make good decisions and add staff as they're needed. So if we are short-staffed, we go through a lot of measures to ensure we have enough staff. We pay bonuses. If we had to, would use agency staff. Fortunately, we don't need to do that. I just don't, it's just not my reality that on a day-to-day basis that we have understaffed. You can't take care of the patients if you're understaffed. If I'm understaffed to the point where something like if someone is at risk of eloping or we can't care for the patients, then I cap admissions. Then I can't take patients, so I have to limit admissions because I don't have the capacity to treat people. That's kind of the day-to-day reality of how we run our hospitals.
Diane, if you can just explain, since it's your first time to the CDA, though, your role and the 16 hospitals you have in the region, that this West Allis location will be within
Yeah.
your region, and so when you speak from your experience of how your hospitals run, you would expect this one and the standards that you've set, because these other states, we don't know the specifics of what that was, but these aren't in your area, and this one will be.
And every hospital has a CEO who's administratively responsible for the hospital and who would report to me. But again, it's just not, if you're in a situation as a hospital operator where you can't staff your unit to the grids that you have established, then you have to limit the number of patients you take in. That's just the reality of doing business.
I know in my investigation, talking with the Milwaukee County Health Directors, they will be inspecting your facilities.
Sure,
The state
yeah.
will be inspecting your
Yeah.
facilities, and the federal government will be inspecting.
Yeah.
Is that correct?
All before you open and once you open and, so many months after you open. It's a very rigorous process before, during, and after that you have to go through.
comes too,
your
so you
accreditation.
get these surprise visits sometimes, or they come in, like every year, they're looking for anything they can find.
To maintain your accreditation, you have to go through all of that.
There being no other questions at this time, I will close this hearing and move on to our next order of
Can I ask
business.
a question?
Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Clark, I didn't hear you.
That's fine.
Go ahead.
John, to what extent has your department undertaken an independent due diligence?
We have had the police chief do some searching of comparable hospitals that have opened recently to see what kind of the police calls that they've done. We've talked with the Milwaukee County Health Division to see what they did for research and how extensive their research was, to the point where we're comfortable with the extent of what they've particularly with any allegations that are out there and all that stuff, so that we are comfortable that they have been adequately investigated. I particularly addressed those issues that are on the internet. Has the county gotten comfortable with what is out there in the internet world? And they said yes.
And finally, the subject of patient egress into the community has been on the table since this process started a long time ago. And you've answered the question numerous times, but for the record, what is the process? How are patients going to be leaving the hospital?
They will be, there will be a discharge protocol that the UHS currently has. There's also a discharge protocol that we will replicate in our special use. So even if they should change their policy, we could revoke their special use and shut down the hospital if they don't. And that is that they have to have a specified place of where that, a physical place where that person is gonna be taken to, and there has to be somebody making sure that that person gets there. So they cannot be discharged onto the street.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions of the board? If not, this hearing is closed. We'll proceed to the second hearing. The community's executive of the Community Development Authority has filed with the authority the hearing to affidavit public to be filed as soon as received from official newspaper requirement, section 66.33, 1333 of Wisconsin statutes. These documents be made part of the record of proceeding matter. The purpose of this hearing to afford a full opportunity for interested parties to express their views and propose consideration of tax increment district number 17, West Lincoln Avenue corridor, City of West Allis, and approve the proposed boundaries and project plan proof. B, follow the closing of the authority will consider to vote on a resolution designating proposed boundaries, approving project tax increment district number 17, Lincoln Avenue, West Corridor, City of West Allis, Wisconsin. C, if adopted, the resolution will be submitted to the Common Council, the City of West Allis, for approval as provided in section 66.1333 of Wisconsin statutes. Mr. Stiebel, you now have the floor for the second public hearing.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The Community Development Authority received a request from a developer to assist in the financing of the construction of a hotel in the area of 101st and Lincoln. The primary purpose of the request was considering the environmental issues, the acquisition, the cleanup, the construction costs. It was not financially feasible to build that that facility without public assistance. And I'll go ahead and Patrick Schloss go through the ways that we evaluated that to determine is that true, is that the least amount of money that we could give them to make this project happen. It's going to be a substantial increase in what's currently there. I'm going to get into that. And we've also done a number of things. We have our financial consultants looking at the cash-on-cash return and the internal rates of return, those types of issues on the financing side to make sure that we're not overly enriching the project. We also, this time for the first time, hired a company to evaluate the cost estimates, the construction cost estimates, so that we could make sure that there aren't overinflating the cost of the project. And we're also using Allis, our city's financial consultant, to review this project as well.
I want to introduce him that he's here, Todd Taves. I'd just like to introduce to the authority Todd Taves from Allis. You might recall we had Mike Harrigan in the past, and we are now working with Todd after Mike has explored retirement. And Todd's been very helpful in reviewing and helping us through the TIF process, so I'd just like to introduce the authority to him. We'll call him up here in a little bit if we need to answer any questions. The purpose of tonight's hearing is to review the TIF boundary, the proposed boundary, as well as the proposed TIF plan that I believe each of you have received a copy of the plan, which has also a map of the boundary. The site that's under consideration, that's the genesis of this TIF, is 102nd and Lincoln, which is the Weir's office building. With the development, the office building here would be raised, and a new hotel would be constructed around 107 room Holiday Inn Express, and a pad created for a future development. The Holiday Inn Express, you can see here is the elevation that was presented to Plan Commission, has received approval from the Plan Commission. It's a 4-story building, around 60,000 square feet, 107 guest rooms with an array of normal hotel amenities such as outdoor seating, fitness area, indoor pool, etc. The developer has secured its commitment from the flag for Holiday Inn Express, and they are working through their particular numbers to get this development going by later this fall, with occupancy by July of next year in time for anticipated convention. There's a site value for the hotel that's proposed around $12 million. Future development with the 16,000 square foot building in the lot 2 is $3.5 million for a total $15.5 million development. If you look at the current site at 102nd and Lincoln, it has an assessed value of around $1 million. With the $12 million in new development or $15 million new development on the site, you can see it would generate a considerable amount of increment with the project. So when we reviewed the TIF or developed the TIF plan, we developed a broader area. The reason for this is because of the power of the development, as well as what other development can be spurred in this general area. There are, the Mary Queen of Heaven Church is currently for sale. The property next to it has gone through a bidding period and has been on the market for a considerable amount of time and has been underperforming in terms of occupancy. So we were looking to see what other development we can spur through the use of TIF. Coming back to the hotel, the reason the request for $1.4 million was created was because, one, there are some costs that are exceeding the normal range, environmental and acquisition costs, and then demolition, and that's how they developed the need for $1.4 million. In this particular area, just like you to note that based on the occupancy of the rooms, this hotel would have around a $10 million annual impact to the budget. With visitors visiting the hotel, on average, they spend around $200. And that being said, you can see it has a large community impact on an economic basis. As John mentioned before, we did hire SB Friedman to review the TIF, and not the TIF, the pro forma of the development, and found that the margins and the acquisition costs and everything were in line and reasonable compared to national averages. We hired Concord Group to review construction costs, and we found those costs to be within range, and actually the construction costs came in lower than the estimates Concord Group actually developed. So, and then we hired a market study group to review the market study for the hotel to make sure how it would impact any other hotels that we have here in the community. They'll make sure, like the new Home 2 Suites that's proposed on South 70th Street, that this would not have direct competition in a way. The schedule for the TIF, as tonight, is the public hearing for the TIF boundary and the TIF plan. August 6th would be the Common Council adoption or consideration of the TIF plan, and then August 13th would be the next Joint Review Board meeting. This right here outlines the properties that I mentioned before that we were looking at in terms of what other properties could be in this TIF. So that's why we have the broader service area. You can see 3.7 acres of land sitting here that's been on the market, as well as 4.6 acres of land with Mary Queen of Heaven also on the market. One of the purposes or things to note with the creation of this TIF is that it's a rehabilitation or conservation TIF. There's usually in the past we've talked about environmental TIFs, brownfield, redevelopment, blight, and things like that. In this particular case, we're using the term rehabilitation or conservation. It's a statutory requirement to identify what type of TIF you are creating. And then again, there are 17 parcels, and this would have around a $12 million base value in terms of the TIF. And you can see it encompasses a few blocks of land from 102nd to 106th Street. When we developed the budget for the TIF, we included the $1.4 million proposed for the developer, as well as $750,000 for undisclosed development in this particular area. We don't know what could happen at Mary Queen of Heaven or the office building, but we know that if we had some money available, we might be able to incentivize job creation or other tax-based growth in the community. As well as we created a loan pool, like we did in other TIF districts, to improve properties within a half-mile radius of this TIF. Whether it's economic development to help businesses or to help homeowners do home improvements on the exterior to meet exterior code enforcement, things like that. And then we also put funds aside for public infrastructure. This could be a matter of creating a crosswalk or art or bus shelters in order to make this more walkable, bikeable, friendly neighborhood when we have visitors coming to the hotel. So that developed a total budget of around $2.8 million for the TIF. And based on the base value and how the TIF would perform, it would have around 8 years to pay off that increment. Depending on when development comes online, it might go up to 10 years, but we're looking at a payoff in around 8 years. Gladly answer any questions you may have.
We'll also go into closed session at the conclusion of the public hearing at some point in time to talk about the more detailed financial aspects of this TIF. So if you have any questions relative to the details, we'll get into those in closed session.
Come
My
and stand,
question
Mr.
may
Clark.
be more appropriate for the closed session, but I'll ask it and then we can figure out what to do. Since Mary Queen of Heaven is actively marketing its property and has a full price offer, and now it's going through the Catholic Church, the Archdiocese, various people have to approve this sale. And the purchaser is a group of Lutheran churches, so we still have a property that will be not taxable. What, for the boundaries, why would we include that area?
We will talk about that in closed session.
Okay,
You are correct in part of what you have heard. We will go into more detailed of that. In fact, it's not,
That's fine.
we'll just talk about it in closed session.
Yep,
Thank
that's
you.
good.
That's fine.
Okay. Patrick, you
I just wanted to add, this would generate around $500,000 in increment on an annual basis in terms of what the proposed development would generate. Todd is here.
And the ultimate thing to talk about is the but-for test. You know, but for this assistance, this wouldn't happen. That's what our goal is today.
You wanna call him Todd? Todd, if you want to add anything about your review of the cash flow?
I think you covered it nicely, and I think the point maybe to stress here is the fact that while this is a district that could remain open for up to 27 years, and this is a very quick payback at a projected 8 or perhaps 10 years. So the district's got a lot of possibilities to undertake other projects within this area if those opportunities present through the life of the district. So.
And then, well, last thing I forgot to mention, it is a developer-funded TIF, so they would have to borrow the money and then perform to be able to get any of the benefit that the TIF would be creating.
Is that it, Patrick? We'll go to the, you've done with that?
That's it.
Okay. Any interested parties and tenants may now expect their views proposed for consideration for tax increment district number 17, Lincoln West Corridor, City of West Dallas, approved by proposed boundaries and projected plan. Please raise your hand if you have a question, state your name, and if you're here representing another party, please state their name. The floor is now open. Go ahead, ma'am.
Tiffany Stark, 64, West Burnham. I'm very familiar with the area. My daughter went to elementary school there, and I will tell you, it was a pain in the butt to get around there. It's a zoo. So right there you sit because people are getting off the exit ramp off the expressway. You're sitting there to get across, and if west and east are finally clear, then it's the expressway, so you can't get across. So my suggestion would be, if possible, there could be a light put in to have better flow of traffic. That's it.
Thank you. Are there any other questions or statements to be made? If not, I'll call these proceedings closed for this hearing. We'll proceed to our next order of business.
You wanna hold
Item
this
3, you want to go to,
session? Do you want to hold this?
Yes.
Okay. Item 3 to be held until after
Okay, we'll
closed
go to
session.
item 4. Resolution approving purchase and sale agreement between the Community Development Authority. So you wanna hold that one too?
Yes, please.
Oh, 4. 5, resolution design proposed boundaries and approving for tax district number 7. You wanna hold that one too? We already went through that.
Well, we'll approve the boundaries. If you're gonna approve something, we'll approve the boundary and the plan at the same time. So if you're gonna deny the plan and approve the boundaries, wouldn't make any sense, so we'll hold that.
All right. Number 6, authorization of executive director to enter into a letter of intent and agreement with Capri Restaurant Group for the property located at 6610 West Greenfield Avenue. Mr. Steele.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We're gonna also be talking about this in closed session, but we try to talk about in public session as much as we possibly can. And that's gonna be the first part of this presentation, will be to talk about the public information, then we'll get into the details that, the financial issues that are negotiable in closed session. Patrick?
Thank you, John. You might recall the CDA bought this property early in 2018, mainly because there was a quick lube oil change facility looking to buy the property. So when we bought this property, it wasn't a matter of flipping it or anything like that. The idea here was to attract a project that would be complementary to what Mandel was building, the Aurora Clinic, in our vision for the 6 Points neighborhood. And we marketed this property, and we have a local entrepreneur that's looking to buy this property. You might have seen the Business Journal article. It's Capri Restaurant Group. Chris and Abby Paul are the owners of Capri Restaurant, and they are looking to do a new restaurant format at this facility and renovating it. And just for the note, we paid $650 for the property. The letter of intent is $625. The roof on the property is failing, so there are some considerations there that have been requested, as well as the air conditioning doesn't work on the property. The idea here is to create a real entertainment and restaurant venue where you have volleyball, outdoor fire pit, as well as some virtual reality games on the second floor, as well as an event space or a small banquet room on the second floor for guests. This would be a sizable budget of around $1.7 million to do this project, and it is within TIF District number 7. I'll talk about the rest of the financing structure in closed session.
Thank you, Patrick.
Are there any questions at this time, or we'll wait till closed session? Thank you. Item 7, discussion relative to the request for proposal submitted, or item D, consideration relative to report on redevelopment initiatives. Mr. Steele.
Second, we skipped one.
Number 7.
Item 7.
Oh, here, we're gonna that was 67, okay. Discussion on the response to request for proposals submitted for 6771 West National Avenue and adjacent parcels. Mr. Steele.
As part of the 60th and Mitchell redevelopment area that UHS is part of, on the northern part of that site, there's 2 parcels, what we call the White Building, 6771, that's clad in all white aluminum. You notice a couple of strips have been taken off that aluminum to allow the state to ascertain whether the property is historic. And they have determined it's historic, which is very beneficial, and that allows a prospective developer to get historic tax credits. And then also at the same site is the former Perfect Screw site. And so that we're soliciting proposals for the development of both of those parcels. And I'd like to have Sean kind of go through what we have discerned to date. Sean.
Thanks, John. So like John had mentioned, we put out an RFP for this site, for this group of 4 parcels, which consist of sort of this white building, former Kearney Trucker facility. You can see it's sort of clad in the white siding. This is a picture that we found on the State Historical Society website of what it looked like in the past, and so after the CDA purchased it, we went inside and took a look and thought perhaps there might be interest in the development community. So we had a rendering drawn up of what it could look like to draw interest, and we did find that there was interest in it. And as such, like John had mentioned, followed up by removing some of the siding, see if we get historic tax credits. Looks like we can get historic tax credits. And then we put out an RFP for the 4 parcels. So they consist of the white building, what we call the former Perfect Screw building, and then 2 adjacent parcels of that as well. It's bounded by 68th Street, National Avenue, and then Mitchell to the south, and the railroad tracks to the east. Again, this is just a view of the existing site, a view of sort of what it could look like, you know, with all the windows removed, and just, you know, sort of two views of that. This is a map just showing the area that we're talking about. This is the white building, 6771 building, that we put out for RFP for historic rehabilitation, and these are the three parcels adjacent to it, approximately 3.1 acres worth of land. So we did receive a response. We received 5 responses to the RFP. We received 2 proposals for the historic rehabilitation of 6771 building, and received 3 proposals for the remnant site, 3.1 acres adjacent to it. Just briefly going through them, we had one proposal for an event space and food production tenant from Baum Revision Group. We had an 81-unit multifamily proposal from J. Jefferson Company, who do a lot of historic preservation work in the city of Milwaukee. And on the vacant site, on the adjacent sites, 3.1 acre site, 40-bed physical therapy rehabilitation center from a group out of Texas, 72-unit senior living facility from Matter Development. They actually partnered with the Jeffers Company on the proposal, and then a 90-unit multifamily market rate proposal from Mandel Group, who partnered with Baum Revision on the proposal. Both of these 2 historic rehabilitation groups had indicated that they would be willing to mix and match with certain tenants, that they weren't necessarily tied to the people that they had proposed with. So just keep that in mind along the way, but just this kind of breaks out the 2 sites. This is the, you know, National Avenue, 68th, Mitchell Streets. This is the white buildings, this is the sort of the 3.1 acres adjacent to it. We do have the Baum Revision Group is here, along with Mandel, who sort of partnered on. Mandel sort of brought in with the relationship they had with them. They brought in Baum Revision. They're out of Chicago, and they sort of wanted to introduce themselves to the CDA to get a feel for who they are and what their vision is for this property. So I don't know if Scott Golden is here from Baum.
You want us to come up there, or?
Sure. Yeah, come on up.
Sure. So we've got a few of us here.
Oh,
Yeah. All right. So my name is Scott Golden. I'm one of the principals of Baum Revision, and I'm here with my colleagues who are going to introduce themselves in a moment. So we just wanted to come say hello. Obviously, we put a lot of thought and energy into our RFP. Hopefully, you guys spent some time reading that. That sort of speaks for itself in terms of our vision for the project. What we wanted to do today was tell you a little bit about the project and then open it up for any questions, as well as just sort of meet face to face. We take seriously the trust that you'd be putting in our company with the property. We understand it's a public-private partnership. So we wanted to be here today to sort of stand behind our proposal and can open up for any questions. If you guys could click to the next slide. Our company has a 30-year history, specializing primarily in historic properties. The way that we're different than a lot of other real estate development companies is, although we're skilled at executing all the things that are necessary in a real estate development, so legal, construction, leasing, and so forth, we really focus on building what we call decommoditized projects and communities. And what we mean by that is, with each project, identifying what the appropriate uses are in the appropriate environment and making it very unique to that location and that market, so that it can't be replicated by simply putting another project next door. And that involves a lengthy process of discovery in each community that we're in. And what we find through that process is that we end up with something that's really special, really unique, sort of unique environments like the Milwaukee public market, for example, that can't be replicated, right? And the most current relevant example of that is the Garber Feed Mill project in Madison, Wisconsin, that some of you may be familiar with, that we're in the stages of wrapping up, and Brian's going to take you through that because that's an appropriate analog to this project. Our mission statement is, to reimagine and redevelop buildings in authentic communities at the intersection of creativity, art, history, and architecture that ultimately benefit everybody. We use historic tax credits pretty heavily. The historic tax credits allow us to make improvements to the building that the market otherwise sort of wouldn't permit, and then therefore offer to tenants rents that are lower than market rate rents. And in the end, tenants get a really high quality, really unique, special space at a really affordable cost, and sort of everybody wins. So, you know, we were really impressed by the building. We give a lot of credit to your staff here. I mean, we work with a lot of municipalities. It's unusual that you have a staff that's as entrepreneurial and as well versed on historic tax credits, new market tax credits, all the things that this staff that knows and is heavily involved. They were very effective in recruiting us to this project along with the Mandel Group. So we see a building that could really be a really unique jewel to the city of West Allis and to the greater Milwaukee area, and really be a destination-oriented project. And we're excited to dive into it. We're very judicious in determining the sort of projects that we spend our time on, because they're like works of art to us. We spend a lot of time and energy, and so we're sort of chomping at the bit to get involved here. This is a building we really believe could be something special and could continue with your vision for that community that the farmers market started and that Mandel Group's carried through. So if you don't mind clicking the next slide, I'm going to have Brian tell you a little bit about the Garber Feed Mill Madison. Brian's the project manager for that project and the day-to-day guy.
Great, well, thanks for having me here. I grew up not too far away from here, so I'm pretty familiar with West Allis, just on the north side of Milwaukee. But like Scott said, I'm the project manager for the Garber Feed Mill project. I'll try to be brief to give you just a snapshot of what has been a journey for us for a project that we're all very proud of. But the Garber Feed Mill is located behind Olbrich Botanical Gardens. It was built in 1906. And to make a very long story short, it was vacant for 20 years. And after several attempts to develop it, we were approached by the city of Madison to take on what many people thought was impossible. Next slide, please. And we have now coming to the point where we have are finishing actually our construction process. This project started over 5 years ago as a public-private partnership. We think that it is really the inspiration for what we plan to do here in West Allis. There are many elements that are very similar, both positive and some of the challenges that we would expect in the Kearney Trecker building. But most importantly, our goal in the project in Madison was to create economic development supporting local businesses. And I'm proud to say that we now have 11 of the 12 spots in the building that will be or are currently or will soon be occupied by local businesses that are expanding for the most part. We have a couple entrepreneurs who have started businesses, but we see this as, again, the basis for what we anticipate creating here in West Allis. Similar to this project, it is the Madison Garber project was extremely complicated from a financing perspective. We have layers and layers of financing, including new market tax credits, historic tax credits, contributions from the city of Madison, WEDC and other various grants, and local lenders. Next slide. We could try this. We want to give you an appreciation for somewhat the process of development that our organization is now familiar with and does in projects that are often very underutilized buildings. We've got good internet connection, we can see here. But give you a sense of what 20 years of degradation can do to a building. This was the project when we took it over. If you just scroll around a little bit, Sean, you can kind of
walk through like street view.
Get a sense of it. And I included a link so you can do this, at your convenience. But you can really get a sense of the condition of the building when we took it over. Essentially, we've had to spend millions of dollars on masonry, brand new floors, brand new roof. I think over 90 plus windows have been replaced. A few have been restored. But the way we looked at this building was its history as a feed mill, originally sugar beet factory and feed mill, really set up well for the kinds of uses that we envisioned and have come to fruition in that project with the tenants that we have brought to bear. And similarly, we see the opportunity with the Kearney and Trecker building, given its structure and its industrial past.
It's a dark room.
Yeah, you can just go to the next slide.
That's
so
the photography.
You can kind of get a sense of it, but assuming this wasn't necessarily going to be ideal, I just wanted to give you a sense of the transformation of this building. This is what I like to call our waterfall feature. That's what, again, 20 years of deferred maintenance will do to an old brick building. And this was a picture just taken the other day, so you can really get a sense of how we've maintained the historic fabric of the building through the process of development, but renewed and re-energized it. So what you're looking at there, yep. And this is
See the trees growing?
yeah, there was a tree, yeah, trees growing out of that.
I think the analog from this project to West Allis is this is a very untraditional location for tenants. A lot of people sort of, scratched their head a little bit in the beginning in our vision of consolidating these food-related tenants in an old feed mill in a non-traditional location, right? But the power of the building, of the built physical environment and the community that we built is what attracted those tenants to this project, and we believe that's very much the same for West Allis. And now this has become a very high-profile, highly talked-about project. And today you walk in there and it seems quite obvious, right? Because it's done and it's complete and everyone's validated the vision.
And I think the last slide just gives you again a sense of kind of the grander building. This is our event space on the right-hand side, which is a similar feature that we anticipate including the Kearney Trekker building.
John Reynolds, who's our head of development, is going to talk about another project in Chicago that has some similarities called Rockwell on the River.
And this is my whole presentation. Sorry, I don't have nearly as many pretty pictures as Brian, but so Rockwell was a development in a similar area where it was kind of an odd location. It wasn't really mid-block, it was mid-river, and it was in a complex of 11 buildings that were defunct and obsolete, old industrial buildings that no one really knew what to do with. We saw a lot of the beauty, a lot of the similar things that we have at Garver with high ceilings and bow truss and exposed brick and a lot of the things that people look for today. We've transformed it from this kind of disjointed project to something that really flows well. There's a beautiful courtyard that connects all this, and now it fronts on the river and has become a real gem along the river and along what we're doing along the northern part of the Chicago River, the 312, which should be great. I wanted to touch on just quickly a couple of the tenants. Metropolis Coffee is a father and son team that they needed to expand. They needed this great space, but they didn't want to go out to the burbs. So now they're here, they're with their roasting facility. They do all the roasting here and they have their offices. They're about 15,000 square feet. And then Metropolitan Brewery was a husband and wife team that again, started in a garage, started to grow all that, and they needed the space, so we were able to accommodate them. And we seek those types of tenants to come in, those kind of food makers, those unique stories to bring them in. And so I'd say we're a very patient group when it comes to finding the right groups to come in, so I think it's really important to touch on that. And then of course we have a 16,000 square foot event space there, so another similarity what we're looking at Garver as well as for West Allis.
And then these were part of the RFP. Vatzel is the director of design and architect by training, and he's just going to provide a little bit of an overview of the site plan at this point in time.
So as you guys are familiar, the building itself had its manufacturing roots, and the building itself, it's a pretty utilitarian industrial structure. But what it does afford is a lot of volume and a lot of clear span space between the two edges of the building here. There is a ground floor that is programmed, that we envision programming with approximately 10,000 square foot event space with smaller food production users, and we've had experience with tenants who want to just be a part of that community, but they can't necessarily afford to take on a 5,000 square foot space. They need something that is bigger than their garage, but they still need the functions and facilities of a larger space. And so carving out smaller incubator, if you will, spaces allows for those tenants to be engaged with the event space and with the public in a more prominent way, while still having the ability to manage their income and their rent. There are few additional larger food production spaces available. There's the brown box that you see there is a 5,000, 6,000 square foot space. The two longer horizontal orange pieces are about 3,500 square feet. And we envision that there being this interaction between production uses, but then also the engagement of the local public. And so the green space that you see on the far south end there is a cafe, and so the food production can happen within a more confined and industrial space, but then their product can be served through a cafe. The second floor really is a sort of an interesting architectural sort of expression with concrete floors and the windows sort of being boarded up. It's hard to really get a vision for it, but we envision sort of opening up the east side of those windows there, creating a lot of natural light and flow through that space, and then allowing for an office user to come in and occupy sort of a secondary ancillary space. We've got some additional sort of square footage for mechanicals and for loading and trash, but effectively, just using the volume of the space to program different events, whether it be an extension of the farmers market that happens just up the street. During the winter time, we could have sort of an indoor market. We have experience programming different maker markets in our Garver feed mill project, and we've got some of those set up already for later this year. So the event space could be a multi-purpose sort of facility, and it could be split up and carved up into smaller chunks, but it could also be rented out as an entire volume. If you click to the next slide, there's some renderings of what this could look like. This top image here is effectively the office space with the windows sort of opened up, allowing all that natural light to flow through, and then allowing for a catwalk and mezzanine to be able to look down and sort of people watching the event space. The picture to the right is effectively the event space. These windows here are those old historic windows. Should not touch this.
It's called a touch paper.
The windows, again, would be opened up. We would use historic tax credits to finance what I envision to be probably the most expensive part of this project in endeavor in opening those windows up. And then hard to tell here, but at one point there's actually rails that exist in the building, and so our thought is to have the ability to sort of pay homage to the past and show the processes that were involved with the structure. At one point, the rail connects to the. Did I touch that again? I'm sorry.
It's touchy.
Static. I'll stand back here. And so to be able to bring some interesting details and functions into the space by introducing a rail element to help divide the two spaces in the large volume, and then also be able to show off a little bit of the history of the project. And then this is just on the other side where a different user could come in and set up a larger event space if they wanted to be, or if a tasting room of sorts, if you will.
And so that really concludes what we wanted to present today. We just wanted to kind of give you a brief overview. There's a lot of information in the RFP for those of you that have reviewed it, and then open it up for any questions.
Mr. Clark.
Yes, my question is, your focus seems to be on the event space, a very important part of this. With the Tommy Thompson Center at State Fair Park, which is highly underutilized, how do you justify that space for the events?
Yeah, I mean, the attraction of the event space is the uniqueness of the space and the environment. I mean, the historical element of the building is something such that it doesn't compete par to par with more traditional event spaces. So what we find in all these buildings that we operate that have these event spaces is we're not really competing against hotels. We're competing in a world of sort of alternative event spaces, which would be people going out and renting, a barn or something for their wedding or for a small concert, and then doing stuff like Makers Marts and different things like that, which I know you guys do with the farmers market. So we believe that our competition would be anything that could host a certain number of people in the metro, but we'd be very unique in that standpoint that we'd have an environment that could not be replicated. That's the decommoditized nature of it.
And it's also supported by those food production users that are in the space and housing that space. So we have another project where we have built this sort of amorphous community. We envisioned it was a lot to sort of help convince tenants to believe in that community. It's a collective of artists and makers and creators We call it the Creator Space. It's a sort of an old 150,000 square foot warehouse facility that we converted, and we host events to help support the tenants, and the tenants help champion those events and bring tenants, or bring guests, I guess, who wouldn't necessarily traditionally go to a space like that, into that space, and it sort of is this like symbiotic relationship that sort of has just generated through the tenants and through our efforts.
Yeah, our Rockwell on the River event space is highly competitive in the sense that there's a lot of event spaces in Chicago and a lot of options. And it's at a higher price point. That project has no tax credit subsidies. Illinois doesn't have state tax credits. And we didn't go federal on that project, and there's no credits or anything like that. And we booked 200 events in the last year. I mean, absolutely crushed the competition because of the uniqueness of the space.
Any other questions? How many people in a range do you think the event space could hold?
It really is dependent on the type of event and the style of event, and it really is done. I mean, from an architectural standpoint, we sort of do on a square footage basis. Right. So this could accommodate anywhere, I don't know, 300, 400, 500 people. Don't quote me on that.
That's okay.
Because I'm not necessarily.
We're gonna coach you.
I don't want to put. Yeah, right.
but the flexibility of the space is really the best feature of the space. So smaller events based on larger infrastructure that could be brought in because of the sort of large volume of the space that it offers. If there's a market, there's obviously a lot of structures and a lot of booths that are set up, and so less people are being able to fit through there. And it's also largely dependent on parking as well.
Alderman Weigel. Mr. Chair, thank you. I have a couple of comments and some questions. I was able to get out there last week. Brian, I think we didn't hook up, but I was able to poke around at the Garber Mill, take a look at it. I was really impressed by what you guys were able to do there. And when they say the location is challenging, for Madison, it's off of Fair Oaks. It's not the typical East Washington address that you see all the development going on in the Madison area. And for them to bring in those tenants that they've had, I gotta say it's great. I mean, it's right on the Cap City Bike Trail, but it's a challenge spot is right, you know, but it looks beautiful. Back to the event space, what are you doing for parking at the feed mill? I mean, what do you think the total parking lot's gonna be there? One of the questions we have is an event space with, say, 500 people for a wedding, and obviously it's 2 people to a car, maybe 4 to a car. You know, yeah, there's gonna be shuttles from the hotels and Uber, but we're still gonna need to park some cars in that neighborhood when there's a big event there.
Yeah, so I can address, you know, our view on parking. We talked a little bit about that in response to the RFP, is that we think we probably need something like 80 dedicated spaces to the building on a day-to-day basis for the functions that would occur in the building on a regular basis, and then the ability to increase that parking for events only, right? And we think we have some flexibility to increase that parking. One study we haven't done is how many cars could you fit under a valet configuration on the site, because the actual building does have some property area to park cars, right? And in a valet line, you can fit a lot more cars. That study needs to be done. So we don't know how many spaces we would need off-site. The nice thing about, in our partnership with Mandel is that we've worked out the ability to expand into their parking lot for the multifamily component of the project for those events. So that solves it. If there was some unique event where there was excess parking, I presume, the city's got some options that could be cooperative and that could work in a valet type scenario.
So, I think we were told, and Sean reiterated tonight, that you would do this project regardless of whether Mandel gets the rest of this, we'll call it the Perfect Screw properity next door.
Right, and that part is true.
We'd have to work out some other parking.
Yeah, but we'd have to solve the parking, regardless, And, we've been, I think these guys have done a terrific job of sharing the vision of the city of West Allis in general. I mean, hopefully you guys saw in our RFP, we kind of played off that's why West Allis in our response, but specifically your vision along National Avenue there, which Mandel started. I mean, there's a lot of sort of similarities between their apartment project, what's going on at the farmers market, what we're proposing here. So we'd love to see that continue.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Bob, did you want to say something?
I don't know if Sean, I don't know what you want me to speak on this evening. I was prepared to speak on a number of things. I will say that, and we did send in some slides, but I don't know what your time constraints are. I actually would like to ask to come back to your next meeting and provide a very detailed update as to what we're doing, and in particular to respond to some of the commentary questions that I've just recently received, and about progress or what progress is being made. There are a lot of very exciting things that are going on there. On all of the site, we're already $46 million in to the development. There were some hiccups at the front end of the development that slowed us down. You guys have dealt with Aurora. You can only move Aurora as fast as they want to move, and they put West Allis behind 2 other projects, so they literally delayed us by a year getting out of the ground. But since this time, since spring of 18, there's been continuous development going on. Our goal is to continue development down to the so-called SONA piece, and our proposal is to then extend the development down to the site, the Perfect Screw site, adjacent to this building, because with multifamily housing, the one great thing we can do is we can create lots of value per square foot of land area. It's one of the highest values per square foot of land area you're gonna be able to generate in that area. And B, as you can see from the site plan, it does provide for this nicely screened area of parking in the back. I hadn't even touched the screen. I'm just standing way back here. Geez, Sean, But we figured out that you can get about 180 to 200 stalls of parking on that site. And any of you, we all live in Milwaukee. We all understand the term free parking, which is like a birthright here, right? So, I mean, for this project to be successful, for the farmers market to continue to be successful, we have to solve for the parking needs because people expect it. We're not on a freeway, we're not on an interstate, so this is very, very similar to that Garber Feed Mills property that Alderman Weigel was mentioning, that people are gonna come there, it's a destination. The Baum project, the reason we sought them out, which we typically don't go out and look for other developers to compete with us on stuff, but we were so impressed with what they did. We said, if we could get them to come to West Allis for this project, it would be a coup to bring in a developer from Chicago that's so well known for this type of work. What a way to take that building, which we weren't even talking about when we started the 6 Points project. Now we got a building that's gonna be an activity generator. They'll get the business meetings here, they'll get the receptions here, and they're right, the uniqueness of the space is what attracts you. I haven't been in a wedding reception in a hotel ballroom in about 3 years. I'm going to every converted industrial building, the grain exchange and this and that, all over town. So this is exactly what the market is asking for. It's gonna be a huge traffic generator. Market rate, multifamily housing, disposable income, people patronizing area businesses, people going out to bars and restaurants in the area, activating the neighborhood. To have the ability to move that one more block to the west and just further intensify this area, it's just, I think the timing of this is just incredible. But I want to come back and talk to you about our work here separately, because you guys have about 5 closed sessions backed up already tonight, so I'm just going to shut up. Thank you for the opportunity to say that.
Thank you, sir.
Sean, if you could briefly go through the other 3 projects that.
Sure. So thank you to Baum and to the Mandela Group for what they've shown here. So this is what Bob was talking about. Bob is from the Mandela Group, and obviously they're in the midst of completing the west, and then they would move on to SONA, and they have sort of an exciting project that they're looking at doing on SONA with some commercial use, and then would move on to a mixed-use building, and then their proposal would be after that would be to build in, say, late 2020, early 21, would be to do a 90-unit multifamily building next to the white building. Like Bob had mentioned, this shows some shared parking that they would have in the back. They would also be, the residential units would be serviced by underground parking, which would allow for that. been through the bond group's proposal. The other proposal for the historic rehabilitation portion of this came from J. Jefferson Company. It was 81 multifamily residential units. What it essentially consists of is sort of a building within a building. And so, you know, the reviews we've seen thus far, the feedback we've received is sort of favored the use as more of an event, is the event space, the initial proposal that was previously discussed. It could be a catalytic use, you know, for the neighborhood and things like that. But to get a proposal from J. Jefferson Company, one of the, you know, biggest historic rehabilitation developers in the area, was we were excited to see that. The feedback we received thus far has favored the event space. We did receive 3 proposals for the vacant land, 3.1 acre land. First was a 40-bed inpatient physical therapy rehabilitation facility. About $17 million of estimated construction costs. It would be $10 million of taxable value. They're requesting $1 million of assistance. They would pay us some for the land. The advantage of this one is the sort of, they could begin construction when the development agreement was completed. And it has a nice employment factor of about 150 employees. We did put a team together to review all these, and one question they had was just, you know, does this capitalize on the overall redevelopment vision of the area by the nature of the use? SB Friedman was just looking for a bit more information before they weighed in on it. The second proposal for the vacant site, the 3.1 acres area, is a senior living facility, $12 million taxable value. They're also asking for assistance, at $2.8 million of assistance. They could begin quickly. And again, the question came up from the review team of, is this the best to fall in line with the vision of the area?
It's more of a CBRF than a senior housing, if you, assisted housing, that kind of.
And then, of course, the third one is they came in with the Baum Group and proposed from the Mandel Group 90 units, $9.5 million in value. We are still looking for some details on the amount of assistance that would be needed. They think they could begin construction in late 2020, like we said, would phase it in. They'd finish the west, move on to Sona, and then move on to this site. Reviewers expressed concern about not having enough information. They like the use in relation to helping stabilize the west and Sona. SB Friedman couldn't weigh in with not enough information. That concludes what I have on this. I'd be happy to take any questions or concerns.
Any questions we got any on the board? If not, Jason.
Just curious, on the Jeffers proposal, did I see something there that on that building there, does that say 74 indoor parking stalls?
So they did actually partner with, their proposal partnered with the senior proposal, and so that's what, is that what you're seeing?
No,
Or are you pointing to this?
Oh, yes, they're talking about, they would actually lower the floor a bit and put underground parking underneath the first floor.
Okay.
So it'd be kind of partial under.
Yeah, 74 units would be underground.
Okay.
Other questions? You wanna go into closed session, or you wanna go to redevelopment?
Let me just go through that very quickly.
Okay. Item D, consideration of redevelopment report on redevelopment initiative, Mr. Stevo.
There's just 4 items that have multiple parts, that we'd like to just run by you to give you a heads up what's coming up. Patrick?
Just quickly, I know Bob Monit's here, the west properties, the drywall is going in, they're moving along nicely in terms of the apartments. I believe they're getting a number of, they have a website up for renting, things are progressing. It's amazing, I had this picture taken in May and it's already outdated, so.
Oh, okay.
So, it just keeps moving, yes. So, as we talked about before, there is some great vision in terms of some commercial activity, in terms of space, which we'll be discussing in the near future. There's also, they've met with us to discuss a mixed-use building with 10,000 square feet of commercial space and multifamily apartments in this area. that would help, of course, the word was activate the neighborhood, bringing more people to the neighborhood, eating at restaurants and going to the establishments is always a plus. Highway 100, the former Pick and Save, this has been on the market for some time. There is a college looking at it, and the owner and them are exchanging terms. That's all I have on that. They have not met with us. They're just going back and forth, and we'll see where that goes. There's a lot of it deals with how much it's an 85,000 square foot building, how many square feet the college would need, and could another development even go in there with that. So they're looking at how to maximize the site. It's been on the market for around $4.5 million. So this is just because it's the Highway 100 corridor. Alfonso's Pizza is located on Highway 100. I have the wrong address here. It's 9130 West Greenfield Avenue. Alfonso's Pizza would move into this building. They've applied for a loan. And then a new restaurant would move in here called Kings and Queens Jamaican restaurant. That's out of this deal here. It's a 2-for-1 type of deal because it would also be an investor in the Jamaican restaurant. We've been discussing the Burger King internally, what to do with the vacant Burger King. And a lot of people comment, why is this vacant? Well, Burger King has a lease on the property. They pay a lease. They pay the taxes. The property underneath it, they're paying rent to the property owner. The land is currently marketed for around $400,000 plus some dollars, and they're paying around $3,000 a month in rent on the property, Burger King. So Burger King owns the building and owns the parking lot on a separate parcel. You can see it here, and you can see the current assessment on the property. I don't understand with Burger King why they pay rent here for this site. Vacancy, I guess, is a business, but it's something that we're exploring here as a city and what we can do to address. You can see here, based on their tax bill, we also help maintaining the property. What I mean by that is we're cutting the grass, we're removing the snow, and there's even a delinquent water bill on there. So I bring this to your attention because there's a lot of discussion about why is that vacant and what can we do about it. We're exploring that. So.
Fortunately or unfortunately, they pay their property taxes
Yeah.
every year. They pay us to effectively hire somebody to mow the grass or some of the sidewalk.
An initiative by the Common Council was to do a market analysis of the Highway 100 corridor from the city limit on the north to the city limit on the south to 116th Street on the west to the I-94 or 894 going past the city here. The idea here is to review the market, get shareholder input. We're going to be launching this initiative. The idea here is to have it completed by October, and having that for the council. It would be a joint type of meeting, Plan Commission, CDA, council. Here is what's the final report for the Highway 100 corridor. So this is launching. The city council approved Ginsler. They were instrumental in I believe at the Pfizer Forum and the Harbor District Vision, and we hired them to review the whole market of Highway 100.
They also did the Cobalt project.
Correct. Thank you, John. This is Beecher Street. I'm sorry.
Back to Highway 100, I understand that Sam's Club has been sold.
We're gonna talk about that. Are we talking about that here? No, we're not. Yes. Beyond Vision acquired property.
I don't know if I have that in here.
Yeah, we're not talking about that today.
So on Beecher Avenue, we've added this to the list of activities because this corridor seems to be a lot of investment, and there's been a lot of interest from other businesses trying to see how they can enter in this area. This is the Brew and Coffee pub, putting right next to the West Allis Cheese and Sausage Shop. Mark Lutz is the entrepreneur here. So this is going very quick. The foundation is here for the pergola, as well as the inside, the bar, and everything is coming along quite well, as well as the meat market. I did this last night too. You can see here the firewalls going up, and this would be the meat market on Beecher. So National Avenue corridor, there's been a lot of activity. 6125 West National Avenue is under contract with the Red Lion Group. They were here a few years ago. They're back. They've put an offer in. They've met with staff, and they're looking to possibly do one of their theme restaurants in this corridor too. This is a property that we've seen some inquiry, but we believe there's some environmental investigation. This is part of Motor Castings. It's been on the market around $490,000, and it's 6325 West National Avenue. But it is on the market. We are understanding there's some consolidation going on, or maybe family video, which is a kind of an older format now, if you think of movies, etc., with be able to get them Netflix and on demand. There's possibly a Dollar General looking at the site. How we learn things? A signage contractor called about changing the signs.
Ah.
So nobody's talked with us, but though it's a permitted use. So there's some activity on 76 and Hicks. Just for the knowledge of the CDA, the environmental investigation by the property owner is complete. They have a closure from the DNR, and there's an interested HVAC contractor that's interested in the site, possibly for a 16,000 square foot facility. So.
Any questions regarding anything for
I have a
Mr. Steve or Patrick?
For the voting, the common council on the 16th of July for the mental health facility, is that a closed meeting?
No.
No, that's open.
Okay. And then would the results be online or
Yes,
how do you?
yes.
Okay. All right, thanks.
Thank you. Can I have a motion to go into closed session?
Second.
If we move in second, could you take roll call, please, Patrick?
Wayne Clark,
Yeah.
Alderman Chaplesky,
Yes.
Jason Metz,
Aye.
Karen Gale,
Aye.
Don Neighbor,
Yes.
Trey Mutter. We'll vote.
We're in all closed session.
I'll second.
Moved in second. Any further discussion? If not, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Resolution passes.
So move for number 6.
I'll second.
You're ahead of me.
All in favor?
Been moved in second. Any further discussion? If not, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Resolution passes.
That's it, right?
I think we got our marching orders on February.
Yep, we don't need to vote.
No,
Nope.
that's it. Any further business to come before this committee? If not, then I will motion to adjourn.
I move to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Meeting stands adjourned.
The authority letter starts so much.